Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, from the Happiness and Success GPS is Chip Janiszewski. Chip, how are you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Can't believe we're winding down April already. It's been a very,
Ti-
very different month.
It really has. I saw this great meme the other day that said 2020 is a unique leap year. February had 29 days, March had 5 weeks, and April had 300 days. And it does seem that most people have just lost track of time during this pandemic while they're staying quarantined and physical distancing and doing what they can to stay safe and healthy.
It's been amazing times, which kind of leads us to going back to a really old classic book, which, unbeknownst to a lot of people out there, they're going to find out that they're actually practicing a lot of what we're talking about, which when the first time we reviewed this a few years ago was really outside the box stuff that didn't make sense to a lot of people because most people were caught up in the materialistic world that we've kind of had to dish basically because of this COVID virus. So this is going to be very, very interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to identify this with this a whole lot more. Number one, because of what they're doing, but number two, because of what they're actually seeing in the news, on the media, with everybody that's doing wonderful, wonderful things.
Yes, that's a great intro. And this week we're going back to the Success Showcase bookshelf and we're talking about The Go Giver. And this is, everybody's familiar with the phrase go getter, but the go giver looks at some of the laws that they've put forth on how you get more by giving.
Yeah, basically, this is not that there's anything wrong with materialistic things, but the bottom line is, and we've talked about this a lot of times, that if your main goal in life is just material gain, you are never going to be happy and you're never going to be as successful as people who give to get there. And it takes a little bit of effort to do that. It takes a total paradigm shift. But the bottom line is, once you start doing this, you yourself are going to improve big time as a person, and you're going to be a whole lot happier, and you're going to be a whole lot more successful in everything that you do just by taking this approach, which is really the approach that we were born with and that we were meant to take in the first place.
Exactly. And the book is actually told in story form. It follows the journey of Joe, who he's actually worried about his job and meeting his quotas, very common concerns that most of us, at least before COVID, had to deal with. And it takes him through the process of how he learns the laws of stratospherical success.
Yeah, the five laws, and basically, I mean, it starts with a crisis going. It's the end of the quarter. He's trying to make his quota. He's got a big sale on the line, and all of a sudden, the sale didn't happen, and he didn't make his quota. And financially, it was a disaster for him, and so on. And so, what he did is he said, "What am I going to do?" And basically, he was referred to this influencer, and that's what this book is about: is how he deals with this person who's the connector for everything. And he connects him to five different people, learn the five different laws of stratosphere success, and that's really what this whole book is about. So it is told in storybook fashion, but it's a whole lot of practical things too, with very, very believable characters in there also.
And I think it's very applicable to what people are going through now. Certainly, small business owners are struggling to keep their businesses afloat. So many people have been laid off either temporarily or permanently, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet. And those crises are not all that different from what Joe was dealing with. And by learning these laws, you can move forward in what you're doing. And let's start off with the first one, which Joe learns is the law of value.
Yeah, and the law of value, a lot of people think value is what? Money. If I invest this much, I'm going to make this much. And the law of value says your real worth is defined by how much more value you give than how much you get paid. And the bottom line is, okay, how can I ever give more than I get paid if you're only looking at the money side of things? But what value is, it goes way beyond profits. It's the way you're actually serving other people. It's those intangibles that you deliver as businesses. And if you look at what's going on today, I watched 60 Minutes last night, and both GM and Ford, I believe, are making ventilators now for this pandemic crisis. They switched over and they
Yes.
were able to do this. And the bottom line is they're doing it not for profit, but they're doing it for value. And the bottom line is when their car business comes back, there's a whole lot of people that are going to remember that just because of what they're giving right now to keep everybody alive.
Right. Very similarly, there was a story on the news this weekend about 28 people who lived in their factory. Excuse me, it was 28 days, it was more than 28 people. But all of these people lived in their factory for 28 days, 24/7, churning out masks for first responders. And they did this without going home. They stayed on 24 hours and lived in the factory because they knew these masks were needed by their community.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bottom line is that what you're doing is serving others. And if you look to serve people first, people are going to remember that and it's going to come back to you. So, um, principle number two.
Well, before we go on to principle number 2, I want to talk about value a little more because people have um, a mistaken idea of what value is, even when they're looking at money. I was actually watching an episode of Wicked Tuna this weekend, and what's going on in that, this is tuna fishermen, and there is a glut of tuna. So the buyers are talking about shutting down the market, and the prices that the fishermen are getting for the tuna have gone way down. And one of the fishermen starts complaining, saying they're not getting paid what the tuna is worth, what the value is. And he showed that he completely misunderstands what value is, because just because he used to get paid more for it doesn't mean that commodity is has the same value today. Value is determined by the person you are providing the service or product to. If there's too much of it, the value goes down. If you're only giving what you're paid for, your value goes down. And the more you provide, the higher your value is. And that's something to keep in mind, that your value is not tied to what you used to be paid.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Basically, it does go up and down. It's the law of supply and demand. And but the bottom line is before you think about the profits, the first thing any business has to ask itself is how are they serving others? And
Right.
the examples that we just brought up, as far as just switching what they do to focus on the times now, I mean, things will come back. I mean, there's other businesses that are having problems too. I mean, the dairy business, because there's nothing going on with restaurants and
Yep.
travel and all that kind of stuff. The cost of milk and food and things like that is going down. Gas is $1.79 a gallon. I mean, there's all kinds of you know things going on that we never would have expected happen. And actually, one of the good examples of people coming together to serve others is our own government, which put aside things and actually has really taken care financially in a lot of different ways as far as businesses goes and individuals to help people get through this, because obviously if they did nothing, we would really be in a whole lot of trouble right now.
Oh, yes. All right. So the second of the 5 laws is the law of compensation. And that actually ties into what we were just talking about. Your compensation is different from your value.
Yeah, it says your income is decided by the number of people you serve and how well you serve them. And really, now more than ever, that is an exact uh, great way to follow up what the law of value is all about. They're so related to each other.
All right. The more people you serve, the more valuable you are, and the higher your compensation is.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
if you look at value as putting potential into doing what you're doing, the law of compensation is actually what you're actually earning as a result of doing what's most valuable for the people. That's
right. And the key to that is that you're providing value to the people. You're not doing what's best for you. You're doing what's best for your clients, your customers, your community. And that's what boosts your compensation.
yeah, which is what's good for you.
Right.
What-
Yeah. It's,
so,
and that, that also brings up an interesting point, because there's a lot of people that go, well, how can I serve others if I don't serve myself first? If I don't have a salary coming in, if I don't have enough money coming in, I can't do this for others. And that's actually the reverse of how it tends to work. The more you do for others, the more you will get for yourself.
yeah, it's basically getting other people involved. I think the example in the book, which I haven't read for a while, I have to admit this, but there was this grade school teacher, Nicole, who used to play a lot of games with their students and did very well with that, and it actually ended up being the CEO of Learning Systems Software, which put together games for people to use. And the reason that that happened is because there was a huge investor that saw what she was doing, and that's how she ended up there. To make a long story short, but she did it through the law of value and by compensating other people just by the way that she was doing things and getting everybody involved, family, friends, students. And so that's
Right.
really important.
And as the story explains, we all know teachers are underpaid, but it was the value she was creating for her students and for their families that was spotted by this investor. The investor helped her create the company, which then meant she could serve many more people. And by providing value to that many more people, her compensation went up.
Yeah, and basically the way that this compensation works is something that's very near and dear to what you and I do a whole lot of, and that's networking.
Yes.
The more that you provide value and unconditionally, the more people are going to be talking about you, and you never know where it's going to come from. But that's how this whole thing goes. It's by word of mouth because people love to talk about people that they know, like, and trust, and have done well for them. So,
So the third law that the book talks about is the law of influence. And influence, unfortunately, this is something that's been the word itself has been diluted in today's world because we use the word influencers so casually, and generally we're talking about somebody who has a lot of social media followers or talks a lot in public but doesn't necessarily add any value or provide any real service. And that's not real influence. What the book is talking about is real influence.
yeah, the law itself states your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. And what that is thinking outside the box, unconditionally giving, just going out there and being and doing rather than telling people how to do things and that kind of thing. It's just being. That's what influence is all about.
Right. And in many cases, what the law of influence is referring to is leading by example. It's not about trying to sell people and trying to push them to your way of thinking. It's leading by example, showing people the benefits by doing, and having them say, "Oh, yes, and also by giving of yourself and provide, again, building on the previous laws, providing value to others, it inspires people to follow you and live by your example. And that's real influence. We're not talking about the Kardashians and social media influencers. We're talking about people who give of themselves to make the world a better place, to help the people they know, to help their community, that influence others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Albert Schweitzer has a great quote that kind of puts everything in a nutshell, and it says, "Example is not the main thing in influencing others. It is the only thing."
Right. And, the law itself in the book talks about the fact that the best way to build a strong relationship is to focus 100% on helping the other person. You're not keeping track of what they owe you. You're not keeping track of how much more you've done for them than they have for you. It's just about helping without expecting anything in return. When you do this, you do tend to get in return because people know that's not why you're doing it. And they're more likely to be there when you need help.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about relationships, and the bottom line is, when you add value to other people freely, unconditionally, they're naturally attracted to you, and they want you to succeed, and they're telling other people about you too. And you basically are building your army of personal ambassadors just by being a really selfless influencer.
Right. And again, I hate the fact that people think of influencers as these folks on social media that are selling fashion and selling makeup. It's being an influencer is not about selling. It's about being and it's about doing. It's about helping others. And in turn, when you need help, that help will materialize because if you're helping others, people have absolutely no problems helping you in return. There was a story on the news several weeks back about a year and a half ago. There was this tech company that the CEO lowered his salary to $75,000 a year and raised the minimum salary of all of his employees to $75,000 a year. And this is when everybody was up in arms about CEO pay and minimum wage. This is what this one company did. Well, the COVID crisis hit and the company's revenues fell like a stone. The same as most other companies are seeing now. And they had absolutely no problem because every one of their employees said, okay, you know what? We will take a pay cut to keep the company going because we know when all of this is over, it's going to return to what we were getting. And you were there for us, so we're going to be there for you. So it's not just, a one on one thing, it's how you run your business, it's how you build your relationships. It's about organizations doing the right thing, not just people. And that's really how the law of influence works. And how these things come back, it's not simply this, mystical idea of karma. It's literally people saying, okay, you were there for me, I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, the way to actually influence people towards a more positive way and looking at things and being more collaborative is exactly what you were talking about. It really is a change of philosophy and perspective, and people are striving, they want to be that way. And all they need is a few people to actually show them how to do it by doing it themselves. And what you have is a movement, just like we talked about. I mean, there's so much great stuff going on right now by a whole lot of people in this world, and we're all getting back to the way our perspective, I think, is as far as how we look at the world and the people in this world is a whole lot different now than it was a month ago, 2 months ago. It's just amazing.
It really is, because nothing brings out the best in people like a crisis, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And, when things are dire, when things are needed, people do step up. Now, the trick is to be one of those people that steps up before the crisis hits, when it's not a dire emergency that you step up. Because there's an old saying, oh, this person, when it hits the fan, when push comes to shove, this person's there for me. But the fact of the matter is, how often does push come to shove? The real influencers are the ones who were there before push comes to shove, the ones who were there day to day. And that's what that third law is all about.
Yep. So, and a really, really great trait of all these people who are influencers is the fourth law itself. And it says the biggest and most valuable gift you can offer is yourself. The bottom line is you have to be your true self as opposed to just trying to put on an act to achieve this and to achieve that. And if you become your true self, that is so, so important.
Right. And if you couldn't tell from that description, the fourth law is called the law of authenticity.
That's right.
And we've talked a lot about authenticity because that's what the most successful people, it's one trait that the most successful people all share, is that they are their authentic selves. They're not putting on airs. They're not pretending to be something in public and then doing completely other things in private. Although there are loads of people that do that, and that's unfortunate. But just watch the news on a regular basis and you'll see these people tend to get, what's coming to them. You have to be authentic. Be
Absolutely. I mean, people are good. People, there's an example in this about a realtor who was the most polished as far as knowing everything to say at the right time and so on and so forth, but couldn't sell a house and was really getting down and ready to quit the business itself. And then all of a sudden, she's talking with a person and asked the person about themselves. And they have a nice long conversation and hardly ever even talked about a house. And she became one of the top realtors ever just by changing her approach to not trying to manipulate things and to sell things and whatever, but to take genuine interest in the people that you were dealing with. And the bottom line is, people are genuinely interested in other people too. We all like to talk about ourselves also, but it's really, really important. If you get other people talking and feeling good, that goes right back to you too and makes you feel absolutely wonderful. It's really, that's part of everybody's authenticity.
right. And when you're open and honest about what you're doing, who you are, it makes it easier for people to relate to you. We've said this is all about relationships. Well, you can't build a relationship if you're hiding who you really are. You need to be open about that so that people can relate to you. And once they relate to you, it's easier for them to be open and authentic with you. And that's how trust is built. And yes, it's not something that happens immediately. None of these laws are things that will change your life tomorrow. They're things you have to work on and do on a regular basis. And being authentic is one of those things, whether it's on social media when you're making posts, whether it's talking to people on the street, meeting with clients, they want to know who you are. We've talked over and over again over the years about people wanting to do business with folks they know, like, and trust. Well, if you're not authentic with them, you're never going to get to trust.
No, absolutely not. And really, the fifth principle, I think, is sometimes the hardest one to practice. And this one's called the law of receptivity. And what this says is to give effectively, you must be open to receiving. The bottom line is, for every time somebody gives, there's got to be a recipient on the other side. And a lot of times people have a hard time being gracious and receiving things. And one of the things that, if you can just get in the habit of sincerely thanking somebody when they say something nice and just smiling at them, that's a really, really great way to receive things simply. But it's something that needs to be done both for you and for the person who's trying to give back to you too. Remember, we're all go givers. We're not, and to be go givers, there have to be receivers on the other side.
Right. And, for so many people, we've almost been brainwashed into thinking it's a weakness to ask for help. But you have to be open to receiving help. And I'll give a perfect example over how hard it is to be the receiver. This is something I do on a regular basis. And I'm sure most of our listeners will identify with this. When somebody says thank you to you, what's your first response? Most of us don't say you're welcome. Most of us sort of poo poo it off. It's like, oh, it was no big thing, or it's nothing. It's not nothing. And but because it's hard for us to receive, we sort of push away that thank you because we're not in the mindset of receiving. And that's a big part of this is for all of this to work, for you to be able to give and get back, you have to be in the mindset to get back. It's not just about what you can give, it's about being in the mindset to receive and understanding that receiving is not a weakness.
No, the bottom line is we talk all the time about personal development. And in order to be a positive person, the first person that you got to like and be positive about is that person in the mirror. And just realize that all the good things that happen to that person in the mirror, you, are things that you have coming to you because of these laws that we're talking about. And it's very, very important to accept that and be very, very happy to receive things. And the bottom line is you'll feel it inside yourself if you're being phony and arrogant about that versus genuinely happy and receptive. I mean, you can't fool yourself, and it's a big problem, but it's something that everybody has to face. And so, just appreciate what comes. I mean, the law of attraction says that you attract what you do, and if you are giving good, you're going to receive good back. And the bottom line is, you deserve it, not because you did it, but just because you are who you are, because you are authentic, the authentic you.
All right. So it's very important when you do receive to actually be gracious about it. Don't be embarrassed by it, but be grateful that somebody thought enough of you to do this and say thank you, show your gratitude, and don't look at it as, oh, well, it's no big thing. It is a big thing, and it's always a big thing because when you're helping somebody else out, by definition, you are doing something that they themselves couldn't do, and vice versa. When you get something, you are getting something that you could not have done on your own. And it's important to show your gratitude for that and to be able to accept the gratitude of others for what you do for them.
And it really is in everybody because for every time that you kind of shun something off when people try and say something nice about you or whatever, when you're walking away, you're feeling good about yourself. And you people out there know what I'm talking about. So it's okay to be outwardly grateful for doing that because basically showing gratitude for a compliment given to you is giving back again too. It keeps the process going.
Right. And, as good as you feel for receiving the compliment, the, whatever it is, when you show your gratitude, the person you're showing it to feels good as well. So you're spreading these good feelings, which just amplifies the effect. So we're coming up on the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway of this book for our listeners?
You know, I was thinking the other day, it's kind of funny. I don't know if it's something that God's playing with us or whatever, but this whole thing is happening during the year 2020. And my warped mind went to 2020 vision. And the bottom line is, this world is changing big time this year. But I think what we're doing when we look back in retrospect is we are getting in focus as far as the way things should be and the way things are going to be moving ahead in a very, very positive way. There's a lot of silver linings in the cloud, and that we're throwing out a lot of the things that we all that's not important that everybody was just worried about, and we're getting together as humanity to really, really get through this and make the world a better place moving ahead. So it's kind of like it's amazing that this is happening during the year 2020, and really the keys to it is these 5 laws that we talked about. Basically, giving more value than you get, helping as many people as you can help, being a positive influence to other people in your lives just by what you do, being your authentic self, and being grateful when people thank you for it.
I couldn't agree more. I really think the big takeaway of this is that the more you give of yourself and the more value you provide to people, the more you will be rewarded for this. And it's a constant cycle because when you get more than you gave, and then you can give more in return, which then gets more. And it's a cycle of abundance for everybody. And I think that's what people really need to understand is that, again, it's an upward cycle. And Lord knows in today's world, we need upward cycles.
Amen.
You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, the Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make this next week even better. Stay safe, everyone.